The church was filled with lilies, Henry's favorite. Their fragrance curled around the mourners like a soft fog, but to Nora Bellamy, they might as well have been ashes. At 73, she had known loss, her parents, a sibling, close friends, but nothing could have prepared her for this moment. 50 years of marriage buried under a polished oak casket. Nora sat in the front pew, spine stiff, fingers trembling in her lap. Her black veil shaded her eyes, but not the tear that slipped silently down her cheek. Beside her, Lila reached over and gently squeezed her mother's hand. "I'm here, Mom," she whispered, her voice thick. Across the aisle, Nora caught the glint of a pearl necklace and a flash of crimson lipstick. Tessa Bellamy, her daughter-in-law, looked like she'd come from a fashion editorial shoot, not a funeral. The black dress was tight, the heels too tall, her face a mask of studied sorrow. Jordan stood beside her, his posture straight but soulless, like a man waiting for an appointment, rather than grieving his father. They hadn't visited Henry once during the final stretch in hospice. Not even a phone call. Too busy. Always too busy. The service began. The pastor spoke about Henry's life, his decades of community work, his fierce loyalty, his deep love for his family. Nora listened in a daze, his words warping under the pressure in her chest. She stared at the casket, willing herself not to break. Henry would want her to be composed, to represent their family with grace, but her heart was unraveling by the second. Lila leaned in again. "You don't have to be strong right now." Nora nodded, lips pressed tight. Then came the eulogies. Lila stood, her voice unsteady but clear. She spoke about her father teaching her how to ride a bike, fixing the porch swing every spring, telling bedtime stories long after she was too old for them. She ended with Dad never gave up on people, even when they didn't deserve it. Jordan declined to speak. Tessa, however, whispered something to him, then turned and leaned toward the woman next to her. The words traveled through the pews like a knife. "Those are crocodile tears. Everyone knows they were practically separated." The whisper wasn't soft enough. Nora heard it. So did the people around her. A wave of silence swept the church as heads turned. Even the pastor faltered. Lila stood sharply, face blazing. "Excuse me," she snapped. Tessa didn't flinch. "I'm just saying what everyone's thinking." Nora didn't move. Her breath caught the air thick and sour. Her grief was still raw, and now it was laid open for judgment. Her son remained frozen, jaw tight, gaze locked on the floor. He said nothing. The remainder of the service blurred into gray noise. Nora could barely process the final hymn. She walked slowly behind the casket, clutching Lila's arm for balance. She didn't dare look back at Tessa or Jordan. She wouldn't give them that satisfaction. Outside the church, as guests murmured condolences, Tessa chatted with a family friend like it was a cocktail hour. "The market's strong right now," she said. "Bet the Bellamy house could sell in a week." Lila heard it too. "You are disgusting," she hissed, stepping between her mother and Tessa. Nora put a hand on Lila's shoulder. "Let it go. No, Mom, not today. She doesn't get to turn this into a sideshow." Jordan finally approached. "Let's just keep the peace," he muttered. His voice, once so much like Henry's, now sounded hollow. Nora looked at her son and saw a stranger. As the guests departed, a sharp tap of heels followed Nora. Tessa brushed past her, not bothering to say goodbye. She headed toward the car, calling back, "Hope the will doesn't drag." "We've got a flight to catch." Nora's eyes narrowed. She held her breath. The will. Henry's will. It was to be read that afternoon, his final wish. She hadn't shared the contents with anyone, not even Lila. But as she stepped into the waiting car with her daughter, Nora felt a strange calm settle over her grief. Henry had planned for this, and the reckoning was coming. The law office was quiet, too quiet for Tessa's taste. She tapped her designer pump against the glossy hardwood floor, sighing loudly, as if her presence in that room was a massive inconvenience. Nora sat across the table from her, Lila to her right. Jordan kept to the far end of the conference room, arms crossed, eyes darting between his wife and the closed folder on the desk. "Do we really need all this formality?" Tessa finally asked, adjusting her gold bracelet for the third time. "Henry's gone. We're all adults here. Let's just get to the numbers and move on." "Some things," said Mr. Granger, Henry's longtime attorney, "require more than just numbers." He slid a single envelope across the table, Henry's name etched in clean, sloping script. "As per Mr. Bellamy's instructions, this letter is to be read aloud by Mrs. Bellamy before any legal documentation is reviewed." Tessa scoffed. "Really? A dramatic reading? What is this, a soap opera?" Lila reached across the table and snatched the envelope before Tessa could lay a finger on it. She handed it to Nora with a nod. Nora's hands shook slightly as she broke the seal. Inside was a thick piece of stationery folded with care. She recognized the handwriting instantly. She took a breath, gathered herself, and began to read. "To my family, if you are hearing this, it means my time on this earth has come to its natural close. I hope you are gathered not in anger, but in reflection. I spent a lifetime building more than just a career or a name. I built a home, a legacy, and above all, a family. Some of that legacy has become clouded in recent years, and it's time I set a few things straight." Nora paused. The room had stilled. Even Tessa was frozen, lips parted. She continued. "Nora, my love, thank you for 5 decades of faithfulness, strength, and grace. You were never just my wife. You were my compass. Every decision I made with you in mind. I know this time is hardest for you, and I hope what I've done will give you peace, not pain." Nora's voice trembled, but she pressed on. "Lila, you are the fire in this family. Your kindness has always been your superpower. Thank you for fighting for me when I couldn't fight for myself." She looked over at her daughter. Lila's eyes brimmed with tears. "To my son, Jordan, know that I never stopped loving you. I saw your struggle even when you thought you were hiding it. I never held your silence against you. I only wished you'd remembered your voice before it was too late." Jordan dropped his gaze. "And to Tessa, if you're surprised by what comes next, then you haven't been paying attention." The silence that followed was deafening. Nora folded the letter slowly, setting it on the table with the weight of finality. Tessa blinked, then let out a forced chuckle. "Cute. Real cute. Now that the Shakespearean drama is over, can we get to the part where Jordan and I inherit the house?" Mr. Granger didn't flinch. "I'll proceed with the reading of the will now." Nora glanced at Jordan, but he looked down at the table, avoiding her eyes. She wasn't surprised anymore. Tessa leaned forward, her smile stretched and ready. But Nora already knew she'd seen Henry's final wishes, and she knew what storm was about to break. Mr. Granger opened the file. "To my wife, Nora Bellamy, I leave the entirety of our family home at 421 Willow Lane free and clear of any debt, as well as a monthly stipend of $3,500 for the duration of her natural life." Tessa's smile faltered. Her foot stopped tapping. "To my daughter, Lila Kramer, I leave $75,000 and my personal library, including the signed editions of Twain Hughes and Dickinson, which she has cherished since she was a child." Lila's breath hitched a hand to her mouth. "To my son, Jordan Bellamy, I leave the sum of $5,000. Tessa jerked in her seat. "Excuse me." Jordan's face went pale, his mouth slightly open. But Mr. Granger wasn't finished. "Additionally, I have established a trust fund of $200,000 for my grandson, Elijah Jordan Bellamy, to be used exclusively for his education, healthcare, and personal development until the age of 25. The co-trustees of this fund will be Nora Bellamy and myself." Tessa's jaw dropped. "You've got to be kidding." Mr. Granger adjusted his glasses. "There's more to be explained. Please hold all questions." Nora sat silent, her pulse steady. Henry had done it. He had pulled the thread, exposed the facade, and laid bare the truth with grace, with clarity, and without apology. And this was only the beginning. The air in the room had shifted, no longer stiff with legal formality, but charged with disbelief. Nora remained still, her expression unreadable, but inside, her heartbeat steady and strong. Every line of Henry's will had been a testament to the quiet power he had wielded all his life. He hadn't just left behind possessions, He'd left behind a message. Tessa's nails tapped a furious rhythm on the polished table. Her lips were parted, but no words came. She looked like a woman who'd prepared all the right lines for a play, only to discover she was in the wrong script. Mr. Granger continued, his tone unwavering. It was Mr. Bellamy's explicit instruction that the trust fund for Elijah be separate from any direct parental control. All disbursements will be managed jointly by Mrs. Nora Bellamy and my office, with clear stipulations on eligible expenses, namely education, medical care, and essentials related to the child's growth and well-being. Tessa surged forward in her seat. Wait a second. That money belongs to Jordan. Our son's future is our responsibility, not hers. She's a grieving old woman, not a guardian. Mr. Granger glanced at her unimpressed. Mrs. Bellamy is both a grandmother and a trustee. Bellamy found her more than capable. If you wish to contest the arrangement, you are entitled to legal counsel. But I should caution you, Mr. Bellamy left extensive documentation supporting his decisions. Documentation? Jordan asked finally, speaking, his voice hoarse. Yes, Granger said. Financial records, emails, and personal notes regarding past support provided to you over the years. Mr. Bellamy noted loans totaling over $250,000, down payments, business ventures, credit card consolidations, all unreciprocated. Tessa turned to Jordan, eyes wide with disbelief. You never told me it was that much. Jordan opened his mouth, then closed it. He looked suddenly small, hunched in a suit that no longer fit right. I didn't think he kept track, he muttered. Oh, he did, Lila said quietly, looking directly at her brother. Because he knew you'd stopped. The silence that followed was suffocating. Tessa fumed, her cheeks flushed deep red. Jordan stared at the grain of the table like it might offer a way out. And Nora sat in resolute calm, her fingers lightly resting on the armrest, just as Henry had done during tense moments at family dinners. She could almost feel his presence beside her. Tessa broke the silence with a scathing laugh. So let me get this straight. The house goes to her. She jabbed a thumb at Nora. Lila gets a chunk of change and some dusty books, and our son gets money that we can't even touch. He's not your retirement plan, Tessa, Nora said softly but firmly. He's a child. That's rich, coming from someone who's been living off her husband's success for 50 years. Nora didn't flinch. And yet, Henry trusted me more than he ever trusted you. That should tell you everything you need to know. Mr. Granger cleared his throat. Let's remain civil. Why start now? Tessa snapped, rising abruptly. This is a setup, a twisted punishment. Lila crossed her arms. You mean a consequence? Tessa glared at her. You always played the golden child, never challenged him and never made waves. No, Lila said evenly. I just didn't treat Dad like an ATM. Jordan stood slowly, rubbing his forehead. Tessa, sit down. She wheeled on him.
What, you're okay with this?
He looked at his mother, at his sister, then at the lawyer, who held the rest of Henry's file like a judge waiting to sentence. Finally, he looked at Tessa. I don't know what I'm okay with anymore. Tessa stepped back as if slapped. This isn't the end, she warned. We'll see what the courts think. You're free to try, Mr. Granger said, already gathering the documents. But I should mention that any legal challenge will make all supporting documents public record, including bank statements and communications your husband may find embarrassing. Tessa's breath caught. What documents? Granger didn't answer. He didn't need to. She stood frozen, calculating. The expression on her face wasn't grief. It wasn't even anger. It was panic, a realization that the control she thought she had was crumbling. Jordan remained standing but didn't follow, as she turned and stormed toward the door. For the first time, Nora saw something shift behind his eyes. Not guilt, not confusion, clarity. Henry's plan had worked, and the truth had finally spoken louder than anyone's grief. You manipulated him! Tessa's voice shot through the room like shrapnel, echoing off the walls with venomous clarity. Her heels clicked furiously as she circled the table, pointing an accusatory finger at Nora. You waited until he was weak and alone, and then you twisted his mind that Will is a fraud. Mr. Granger closed the leather-bound will folder with a calm, deliberate motion. The document was drafted over a year ago, Mrs. Bellamy. Your father-in-law was of sound mind, verified by both his physician and an independent psychiatric evaluator. He made these decisions with full capacity and ample legal counsel. Oh, please, Tessa sneered. Like that proves anything. People get manipulated all the time, especially when they're dying. And she, her finger jabbed the air toward Nora, was with him every day, feeding him stories, poisoning his thoughts against us. Nora lifted her eyes and met Tessa's full glare with a steady calm that was more disarming than anger. I didn't poison Henry, she said softly. You did that all by yourself. Jordan remained seated, his jaw clenched so tight the veins in his neck pulsed visibly. He hadn't spoken since the last clause of the will had been read. His hands fidgeted on his lap, clasping and unclasping, as if trying to grip a reality that kept slipping through his fingers. Tessa turned to him, frantic now. Jordan, say something. Are you seriously just going to sit there while she steals your inheritance? This is your father's legacy, your birthright. Jordan opened his mouth, but no sound came out. He looked at his mother, then at Tessa, then back down to the table again, like it held the answer he desperately needed. His silence cracked something in Tessa's composure. Oh my God, she said slowly, her voice trembling with rage. You knew this was coming, didn't you? Jordan's head snapped up. No, I didn't. Don't lie to me, she shouted, her voice shaking the framed certificates on the wall. You said he was just confused that he'd come around. You said this was temporary. I thought it was, Jordan muttered. Tessa paced like a caged animal. So now what? We walk out of here, empty-handed. Our son's money is locked up in a trust run by your mother, and you're okay with that. It's for Eli, Jordan said, his voice barely above a whisper. Tessa spun around. It was supposed to be for us. That sentence hung in the air unspoken, truth suddenly made visible. The room went still. Lila raised an eyebrow. Wow. You didn't even try to hide it. Tessa turned red, then white. She glanced toward the door, calculating again, her panic bubbling into full-blown desperation. This is war, she spat, grabbing her purse. We'll contest the will. I don't care what kind of paperwork your precious Henry lined up. He was manipulated, coerced. Everyone will see it. Mr. Granger folded his hands. As I mentioned before, contesting this will initiates discovery. Mr. Bellamy left extensive records of prior financial gifts, emails, and written statements explaining each decision. That documentation will be submitted as part of the probate defense, and therefore public. Tessa's breath faltered. You're bluffing, she said, but her voice lacked the usual conviction. You're welcome to find out, Granger said flatly. Tessa's eyes flicked to Jordan, who still hadn't moved. Are you seriously just going to let this happen? Are you going to let your mother take everything? Jordan looked up, and for the first time in years, there was steel behind his eyes. I don't know what's real anymore, Tess. But I do know Dad wouldn't have done this without a reason. Tessa recoiled as if slapped. Unbelievable, she muttered. You're choosing her over me. Again. I'm choosing our son, Jordan said. For once. Tessa's face twisted with fury. Fine, she snarled. Then enjoy your noble little family reunion. I hope it keeps you warm when you're broke. She yanked open the office door. This isn't over. I'll burn this entire sham to the ground before I let that old woman win. And with that, she was gone, heels clicking furiously down the hallway, slamming the glass front door behind her. Silence returned. Jordan rubbed his temples and let out a breath that sounded like it had been trapped in his chest for years. Nora looked at him not with judgment, but with the quiet ache of a mother who still saw the boy beneath the wreckage. Son, she said, it doesn't have to be like this. He didn't answer, not yet. But for the first time, he looked like he might want to. It started with a single post, just a photo of Henry and Jordan from years ago, smiling side by side, at Eli's second birthday. The caption, written by Tessa, in bold, passive-aggressive clarity read, "My husband was robbed of his inheritance. My father-in-law's will was changed under suspicious circumstances while he was weak and under someone else's control. We will fight for what's right. Justice for Jordan, for family. Doesn't mean betrayal." By the time Nora saw it, it had already racked up hundreds of reactions and comments. Some supportive, others confused, many just feeding the drama. Tessa had tagged relatives, old colleagues of Henry's, even people from their church. She turned her Facebook into a battlefield, mixing photos with long, tearful updates about being cut out and how Nora had manipulated a dying man to change his will in secret. Nora didn't respond. She didn't even open the app again, but the fallout came anyway. First, it was the texts. Well-meaning friends asking vague, uncomfortable questions. Just checking in. Heard something odd online. Hope you're okay. Then came the calls, one from a cousin in Wisconsin, another from an old neighbor who hadn't spoken to Nora in years. All of them danced around the same thing. Was it true? Did she really push Henry to cut Jordan out? Lila came by that afternoon with a grocery bag and a fierce look in her eyes. "I've reported half the posts already," she said, dropping oranges and eggs on the counter. "She's calling you an abuser, Mom." "An abuser." "I know," Nora said quietly, peeling off her gardening gloves. She's cornered. People like Tessa lash out when the walls start closing in. She's got people believing it. You should see the comments, some of our own family siding with her. "Let them talk," Nora said. "Truth has legs. Lies have to run." Lila exhaled sharply. "I just don't want you alone in this." Nora smiled faintly. "I'm not alone. I have you." But even with her daughter's loyalty, the pressure built. By the third day, she stopped answering her phone entirely. Grief she had expected. Anger too. But public humiliation while mourning the man she'd shared her life with, that was a cruelty she hadn't braced for. So when her doorbell rang that Thursday morning, she almost didn't answer. But something about the knock, hesitant, not demanding, made her pause. She opened the door to find Jordan standing on the porch. He looked awful. His suit jacket was wrinkled, collar open, and he hadn't shaved in at least 2 days. His eyes, once so much like Henry's, were bloodshot and downcast. "Can I come in?" he asked. She stepped aside. He walked slowly to the living room, pausing at the family photo wall. Nora followed her hands, folded, saying nothing. He sat on the edge of the couch, elbows on his knees. "She's saying awful things," he began. "About you. About Dad. I know. She's dragging your name through the mud, Mom. She's got people believing that you brainwashed him, that the will was changed just to spite us." Nora sat across from him. "Do you believe her?" Jordan's mouth opened, then closed again. He rubbed his forehead. I don't know what to believe anymore." "You know your father," she said gently. "You know how methodical he was. Do you really think he'd change his will out of spite?" Jordan didn't answer. Nora continued. "He watched us all, Jordan. Quietly, closely. And he saw things. Things you didn't want to see." He leaned back, head resting on the back of the couch. "She said you turned him against me." "I didn't have to." He flinched. Nora softened her tone. "Henry loved you, son. He never stopped. But he also saw how much you changed, how much you let her lead. He wanted to protect you even when you didn't realize you needed it." Jordan's eyes welled with shame. "I thought we were building a future together. That Tessa and I were—" He broke off, shaking his head. "I didn't see it happening. The distance from you, from Dad, from myself." Nora stood and walked to the bookshelf, pulling out a leather-bound journal. She handed it to him. "What's this?" "Your father's notes. Observations. Letters he wrote but never sent. I found them after he passed. He kept track of everything, Jordan. Not to punish you, but to protect Eli." Jordan clutched the journal like a lifeline. "Is any of this fixable?" Nora sat beside him. "That depends. Are you here because you want to fix it, or Because she sent you. His shoulders sagged.
She didn't send me.
She doesn't know I'm here. She thinks I'm out grocery shopping. A pause. Then I wanted to hear it from you. Whether it's all true or not. Nora looked him dead in the eye. It's all true, Jordan. Every word. For once he didn't argue, he just nodded and said, I think I made a terrible mistake. That night, after Jordan left in a fog of regret and silence, Nora couldn't sleep. The house felt too quiet, too hollow without Henry's gentle breathing beside her. The echoes of Tessa's accusations and the buzz of betrayal kept looping through her thoughts. But something deeper, quieter, kept tugging at her a memory. The key. 2 weeks before Henry passed, he had pressed a small brass key into her hand, his skin cool and thin as parchment. For when you need the truth more than peace, he'd whispered. She'd tucked it into her jewelry box, too afraid to face what it might unlock. Now, sitting alone in the dim bedroom light, Nora opened the drawer and picked up the key. Its weight in her palm felt heavier than it should have. She crossed the room to Henry's old armoire, pulling back his suits and jackets, still untouched since the funeral. Behind them, hidden in a cutout panel, was the safe. She knelt down, inserted the key, and heard the soft click of the lock giving way. Inside, there was only one thing, a thick manila envelope sealed and labeled in Henry's unmistakable handwriting, for Nora's eyes, only if it comes to this. Her fingers trembled as she opened it. She slid the contents onto the bed. At first glance, it looked like a jumble of paperwork, bank statements, printed emails, and typed notes. But as she began to read, the pieces fell into place. A statement from Jordan and Tessa's joint account showed multiple large transfers. $10,000 here, $15,000 there. All moved into a private account under Tessa's name alone. Another page showed luxury purchases, designer handbags, a 5-figure deposit on a European cruise spa retreats, all charged to credit cards Henry had co-signed years ago, under the impression they were for family emergencies. Nora's breath caught as she turned over the next sheet. It was an email chain between Tessa and a woman named Corinne, casual at first, but then alarmingly direct. Once Henry passes, we'll be sitting on a gold mine. Jordan's too passive to push back. He'll roll right into whatever I say. You're sure the will's solid? Corinne had asked. Please. He won't change it. They've been married 50 years. Nora's stuck in the past. Once the estate hits probate, I'll file the paperwork and be out before Christmas. And then came the letter. A printed consultation summary from a divorce attorney dated just 3 months prior. Tessa had met with a firm under her maiden name, inquiring about post-inheritance division and child custody rights. Nora pressed a hand to her chest. Tessa hadn't just been cruel. She hadn't just alienated Jordan from his family. She had been planning to gut him financially and walk away the moment she got what she wanted. Henry had seen this coming, and as always, he had acted quietly, thoroughly, methodically. At the bottom of the folder was a final handwritten note. It was short, barely 3 sentences, but it carried more weight than anything else in the envelope. Nora, if you're reading this, it means I wasn't wrong. I tried to let love and time fix things, but some knots don't untangle themselves. Use this, if you must, to protect Jordan and Eli. You'll know when. She closed the envelope slowly, tears welling in her eyes. Not from shock, not from betrayal, but from the deep ache of missing a man who had always been 3 steps ahead. He hadn't just been her partner in life. He had remained her protector, even in death. The next morning, Nora placed the envelope into her lockbox, ensuring it stayed secure. She didn't call Lila. She didn't call Jordan. Not yet. She needed time to think. How would she show Jordan this? Could he handle it? Would it destroy him or wake him up? She poured herself a cup of coffee and sat in Henry's chair by the window, watching the sun rise slowly over the quiet street. The truth sat just 10 feet away, waiting to be unleashed. The final piece of Henry's legacy. A fire starter, or a life raft, depending on when and how it was used. She knew one thing for certain. Tessa had no idea just how well prepared Henry had been. The knock came mid-afternoon, soft, uncertain, like a question more than a request. Nora opened the door to find Jordan standing there again. This time, he held no excuses, no prepared words. Just a duffel bag slung over one shoulder and eyes that had seen too much in too little time. He looked worn thin. His shirt was wrinkled, and the lines under his eyes had deepened since the reading of the will. Nora stepped aside wordlessly, letting him enter. He walked in slowly, like every step in that house carried weight. "I left her," he said finally, setting the bag down by the coat rack. "Last night." Nora studied him, unsure whether to feel relief or grief. "What happened?" Jordan sank onto the couch, elbows on his knees, hands clasped. "She didn't try to stop me, just stood there, arms crossed, daring me to choose." "Her or me," she said. And for once, I didn't answer the way she expected. A long silence settled between them. Nora sat across from him, waiting. "I've been living in a fog," Jordan admitted, staring at the floor. "For years. I kept thinking I was protecting our family, keeping things peaceful. But all I was doing was disappearing." Nora's throat tightened. "You were under pressure." "No," he said sharply. "Don't let me off the hook. I saw how she treated you, how distant I'd become. And I chose not to deal with it. I chose silence." Nora rose and walked to the cabinet, unlocking the drawer where she'd placed Henry's envelope. She returned, holding it like a sacred artifact. Jordan looked at it confused. "This is what your father left for me," she said. "He didn't tell me at first. Just gave me the key and said I'd know when the time was right." She handed it to him. Jordan hesitated before pulling out the contents. His brow furrowed as he scanned the first pages, the bank transfers, the credit card statements, the emails. As he read, his face turned pale. By the time he reached the letter from the divorce lawyer, his hands were shaking. She planned to leave me," he whispered. Nora nodded slowly. Once the estate was settled, once she had what she wanted. Jordan covered his face with both hands. "My God, I thought we were just going through a rough patch." I thought his voice broke. "I thought she loved me." "She loved the idea of your inheritance," Nora said gently. "Not you." Tears slipped through his fingers, the kind that come from deep betrayal, not just from someone else, but from yourself. From knowing you gave your loyalty to the wrong person for far too long. Nora sat beside him, placing a hand on his back. "Your father didn't want to believe it either, but he saw the pattern. He documented everything so that if you ever found your way back, the truth would still be here waiting." Jordan wiped his face with his sleeve, struggling to compose himself. "All those times he reached out, and I didn't answer. I thought he was trying to control me. He was trying to protect you." Jordan looked at her eyes raw. "I let him die thinking I hated him." "No," Nora said firmly. "He died knowing who you were and trusting that you'd find your way back." A sob caught in Jordan's throat, and he leaned forward, shoulders shaking. For the first time since he was a teenager, he cried openly in front of his mother. "I don't know who I am anymore," he admitted through the tears. "I don't know how to start over." Nora's voice was steady, warm. "You start with the truth, with Eli, with small steps. You learn to forgive yourself, and you surround yourself with people who remind you who you really are." Jordan nodded slowly, tears still falling, but his breathing evened out. "I want to be the man Dad believed I could be. I want to be the kind of father Eli can be proud of." "Then you already are," she said, wrapping her arms around him. "Because you're choosing now." He held on tightly, burying his face in her shoulder, like he did when he was a boy, afraid of thunder. That night, Jordan stayed in the guest room, his old childhood bedroom, still painted in faded blue, with posters of rock bands long past. Nora passed by the door once before bed and paused. The light was still on. Inside, Jordan sat on the bed, Henry's journal open in his lap. He wasn't reading, just holding it. "I'm going to fix this," he whispered to himself. "I don't care how long it takes." And for the first time in a long while, Nora believed him. The smell of grilled burgers and fresh lemonade floated through the backyard, mingling with the sound of laughter and clinking glasses. A soft summer breeze rustled the leaves of the old maple tree, the one Henry had planted the year Jordan was born. Its branches cast long, dappled shadows over the lawn, where Eli chased butterflies with the kind of unburdened joy only children could muster. It had been exactly 1 year since Henry's memorial service. 1 year since the will had been read, the secrets uncovered, and the family put through its greatest test. Now Nora stood at the edge of the patio, watching her grandson with a quiet smile. In the distance, Jordan was manning the grill, flipping burgers the same way Henry used to, careful, methodical humming softly to himself. Lila was arranging a tray of sliced watermelon and corn on the cob nearby, her presence calm and steady as ever. "Grandma, look," Eli shouted, holding up a mason jar. "A caterpillar. I'm gonna keep it and watch it turn into a butterfly." Nora knelt down beside him, brushing his hair from his eyes. "That's a wonderful idea, sweetheart. Grandpa would have loved that. He used to say everything that crawls has its own kind of magic." Eli beamed, and Nora felt a familiar ache in her chest. Grief, softened by time, now more memory than pain. She stood again, scanning the backyard. It wasn't just the space that felt different. It was the people in it. Jordan had changed. The man who once sat silent through his wife's cruelty had grown into someone unafraid to speak up, especially for his son. After the evidence from Henry's envelope had been submitted to court, custody had been awarded to Jordan, with Tessa receiving supervised visits only. But within 6 months, she'd left town entirely, moving to Arizona with a new boyfriend and hardly reaching out since. Her departure, though expected, had left Jordan hollow for a while. But over time, supported by Lila and Nora, he had started to rebuild not just his life, but his sense of self. He'd found a small house 3 blocks away, started coaching Eli's Little League team, and picked up woodworking, something Henry had always tried to teach him. Lila joined Nora on the patio with a glass of iced tea. "You thinking about Dad?" she asked. "Always," Nora replied. "But today, it feels like he's right here. He is. Look at us." Lila gestured to the yard, to Jordan, helping Eli with a wobbly kite, to the food spread on the table, and the easy chatter between cousins and neighbors. He made all this happen, even after he was gone. As if summoned by the sentiment, Jordan approached with a small object in his hand. He looked nervous, a little hesitant, which was rare these days. "Hey, Mom," he said. "I found this last week while going through one of Dad's old tool chests in the garage. Thought you should have it." He handed her Henry's leather journal, the one she thought she'd lost months ago. Its edges were worn and a few pages were dog-eared, but the cover still smelled faintly of cedar and tobacco. Nora opened it gently. The first few pages were filled with Henry's tight, slanted handwriting, his thoughts during treatment, notes on the family, his hopes for the future. As she flipped further, she found something she hadn't read before. A letter addressed to her and their children. "If you're reading this, it means things didn't go the way we all hoped. But that's life, isn't it? Full of twists and second chances. I didn't leave a legacy in numbers, I left it in names. Nora, Lila, Jordan, Eli. You're what matters. The rest, just stuff. If I did my job right, you'll know what to do with it. And if I didn't, well, I still believe you'll find your way. Because love always does." Nora's hands trembled slightly as she closed the journal, a lump rising in her throat. Jordan watched her carefully. "I read the whole thing," he said quietly. "Every page. I think it's what finally helped me understand. He wasn't punishing me. He was saving me from myself, from her, from the path I didn't realize I was on." Nora touched his arm, eyes glistening, and he succeeded. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting golden light across the lawn, Nora settled into the porch swing Henry had built decades ago. The wood creaked beneath her, familiar and comforting. Inside the house, Eli had curled up in the study on the old pull-out sofa, surrounded by Henry's books and model trains, fast asleep beneath the gentle hum of the ceiling fan. Jordan and Lila sat beside Nora, watching the stars emerge. "You know," Jordan said softly, for all her threats, Tessa never understood something simple. "What's that?" Lila asked. This family isn't held together by money. It's held together by love, and that's the one thing she never figured out how to steal. Nora nodded, her heart full. The legacy Henry left behind wasn't locked in bank accounts or hidden in safes. It was right here, alive, and breathing in the people he'd fought to protect. In every memory, every hard-earned reconciliation, every moment of peace. He hadn't just written a will, he'd written their future.